and I'll go ahead and park. So anyway, when we got out to go into the restaurant to get a table, put our name in to get a table, he went kind of around on the side of the restaurant and parked. And so as he was coming towards the restaurant, had parked and was walking towards the door of the restaurant, we hear this loud hit. So what happened was, it was sort of like almost like a dump truck type vehicle that, I don't know what happened, but it actually jumped the curb onto the sidewalk and hit this light pole. I mean, this huge light pole hit this light pole, and the light pole hit right where our car would have been if he had listened to me to say, park right here. And so it was just, really amazing. And one of the things that he said was, he said, I knew that God had told me, not to park there. He said, I didn't know why, but I knew I was supposed to park, around the corner. And so, again, as the man of the house, as a man of God, he does have a responsibility to care for, to protect his home, to really hear from God. But then there are times, and I'm sure there's someone on this broadcast tonight that says, my husband is not saved. He doesn't really, pray. He doesn't, certain things he doesn't do. But at the same time, he can still have wisdom. God can still give him wisdom. He can still have insight. I'm sure all of your parents were not saved. Your mother may not have been saved. They may not have been a practicing Christian, so on and so forth. But at the same time, your mother had insight. She was like, oh, something's going on, or, stay away from that person, so on and so forth. Why? Because there was a vested interest in you. And so in that respect, and so when my husband said that, when we saw it just plain in day, we saw it, even though sometimes, again, I may feel something, I'm like, oh, just park right here, but even though I felt something, he heard God.
Yeah, because, and then the other thing is, let me tell you something, there's some stuff that you can not hear God on, and it can be okay. There's some other stuff, because I would have probably died. So imagine what that would have done for her. Some of the stuff we've been able to make it through, but what would that have done for you if you had told me, oh, again, moving in your flesh, wanting just the comfort factor of it,
right,
and you said, oh, just park here,
right,
and then if I'd actually parked in the place where you said park, and then a few seconds later that thing would have hit me and I would have died, how would that have affected you? You would have took hearing from God a whole different way,
right?
And you'd have taken looking at things a whole different way, and so I think that personally, in my opinion, that you have both spouses need to be able to hear from God.
Yes.
You've got to be able to be in tune with God. You need to be fasting and pray, have a life of prayer, a life of fasting, a life of communion with God. Let me tell you something. 2 ears is better than one. 4 eyes is better than 2, because you got to be able to hear from God, or 4 ears are better than 2. And so you can really be able to hear from God and see from God, and really even have a relationship where you communicate with one another about what you're seeing. If one spouse, if she sees something or hears something, then my thing is, again, going back to communication. But if you can't communicate, it's always going to be a problem. I always come back and say, hey, listen, what are you seeing? What are you thinking? What are you feeling? Talk to me, because I really want to communicate and hear what you're saying. Going back to the one thing, she says, oh, I told you that. And I said, no, you said, you gave me the short version of it. Because again, it depends on the story. Some stories she'll give me the long version. Some stories she gives me the short version. So on this story, she gave me the short version. I said, baby, you can't give me the short version. I need you to communicate and give me the full extent of what it is that you're seeing, and what warning signs you see. Because then that'll make me listen. I'm like, okay, if that's what you see, no problem, because we can't afford to go through that.
Right.
But if you don't tell me what you're seeing, then there's going to be a problem.
Yes.
And so the key to communication is making sure that the other person is actually hearing what it is that you're saying.
Yes.
You can be talking all day long.
Right.
But if you're not measuring what the other person is saying and being able to really hear it, that's going to be a problem. And eventually there's going to be a separation, whether you separate physically or not. But there's also an emotional detachment. And many of you know what that's like.
Yes.
You've seen yourself shut down. You've seen your spouse shut down. And that's another thing. You got to be very, very skilled at watching your spouse's emotions, watching their mannerisms, watch them start shutting down. God forbid you're married to a spouse that's unsaved. Yes. But the reality is, even in the church, there is so much divorce, there's so much separation, there's so much infidelity, and so many other things that comes up as a result of some of this stuff. So I think that's important. I think that's super important in relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I was thinking about in that respect, even though sometimes you may be communicating, my way of communicating may be, your spouse's way of communicating may be different than how you communicate. And so it's important that we begin to, sometimes it's easy to say, well, this is just who I am. This is just how I do it. Take it or leave it. This is just how I'm going to communicate with you. And, this is how I've always done it. And so we've got to begin to reevaluate that, because in a marriage, then you're giving up something. Mm-hmm. You're gaining a lot. You're gaining a lot, but you have to give up something too. There has to be sacrifice. There has to be a time, times, in your marriage that you're willing to endure with that person. You're willing to, I'm not just going to throw my husband away because he didn't take the garbage out for 3 times. And so I'm just like, okay, in life you learn to not sweat the small stuff, and I know you guys have heard that before, but it's like, come on, am I really going to have a long drawn out argument because he didn't take the garbage out? You know what I mean? And so we have to be able to say, you know what? Let's just, how do I work through it? How do I look at myself and not always be in a tizzy because my spouse didn't do something, or they may not have done things the way I would have done things. And so we have to begin to look at that. We begin to look at, many times we want to put ourselves and how we do things on our spouse and say, well, you got to do it this way. If you don't do it this way or that way, then it's not right. So we have to begin to, again, we have to look at that and, how do we effectively communicate, with each other? Because if not, if we don't effectively communicate with each other, then there's a lot of assumptions. Mm-hmm. And so with assumptions, then most times with assumptions, we always think the worst. Most times we don't think the best. We mostly think the worst when there's an assumption.
Yep. And then let me ask this other question. Do you want to be right, or do you want to be reconciled or on one accord? Mm-hmm. Because oftentimes we're fighting to be right, and then you don't always have to be right. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you can give up your right for your spouse, even if your spouse was wrong. Well, I was talking to somebody the other day. And I laughed. One of our good friends, and we were talking about how sometimes as men, we come in the house and we have a closet right by the front door. I'm not talking about a literal closet. We just make a closet, and we start putting our stuff there, packing our stuff there. And we talked about this last season. So, but then on the other hand, my wife always has to have something to drink. So she's always got to have. So she always puts a drink in the car. So after like the 3rd time or the 4th time spilling drinks in the car, I said, baby, we're not having drinks in the car. No water, no cups, nothing in the car, because if we spill stuff, it smells mildew. It goes through this whole process. And so we laugh about it, but it's reality. Each of us has an area. Even in the bedroom, there's a we're in our guest bedroom, but in our bedroom, there is this couch right beside the bed. Mm-hmm. So when I come in, I take my clothes off. I put my clothes right there on the bed.
See the couch.
And my wife says sometimes you can't even see the couch. But I go for weeks at a time, just put stuff on the couch, and then she'll go in and she'll like, okay, let me take this stuff off and go hang it up. And then let me tell you something, it never fails. We go right back. And then the other day we were in Charlotte. I pulled 5 bottles out of the car. I pulled 5 bottles out of her side of the car because she had to have something to drink. She had to have something to eat. I'm like, Jesus. So you gotta look at it and not sweat the small stuff.
Right.
There's gonna be times you're gonna be like,
Yeah.
listen, I'm just gonna take these bottles out.
I'm like, oh honey, thank you so much for taking those bottles and throwing that stuff away. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I know he was like mad as 4 firecrackers on the 4th of July, right? But
did somebody tell you to get on the bed?
Get out. This is what you have to deal with.
Okay. And he never gets down.
No. He think I'm saying sit down, but he know he's supposed to get down.
Yep.
So
He
anyway.
always will sit down. All right. So, so when I look at this, I look at the fact that, okay, here's another question. How do we deal with resentment? What happens when you start to resent the fact that your spouse doesn't value your voice? Mm-hmm. What do you do when you resent the fact that your spouse doesn't listen to you? What about when you resent the fact that your spouse doesn't, that your spouse fusses at you all the time? Mm-hmm. You're like, my God.
Resent the fact that they're giving you wisdom.
Right.
You know what I mean? And they're telling you something that perhaps will help you, but then you don't want to receive it from them. Wow. You're just like, you're always trying to tell me what to do. No, I'm not always trying to tell you what to do. Or he may say, no, I'm not always trying to tell you what to do. I just feel like this will help. And then you begin to resent them because they're giving you sound information.
Right.
So you have to look at, because again, the enemy is after marriages, and so we as the body of Christ, we have to fight for marriages. We have to fight, and even for those that are watching that are unmarried, you have to know and understand going into a marriage is not going to be a fairy tale situation. It's not going to be what you see on television. It's a 30-minute segment. It's a 45-minute segment, but it's not, marriage is not what you see in the movies. And so it's going to take work. You have to really be intentional about it. In every aspect, again, communication, relationships, sex, all of those different things. What's expected of you as a wife? What's expected of him as a husband? As we were, reading the Word of God, your body as a wife doesn't belong to you; it belongs to your husband. What does that look like? What does that entail? So that means he just do whatever you want to do. So we begin to look at that, begin to look at the Word of God. How do we really please God in our marriage? Because many times we can become insensitive to our spouse. We can very easily begin to take them for granted, and then you say, wow, you treat them better than you treat me. You ask them about information, and you didn't even ask me. And so
or you go to work, and you're like, you either of the spouses, mm-hmm. you're at the office, you're at church, you're at other places where you're together, and you're like, you ask them how their day was, but you didn't even ask me how my day. You got up, didn't even say goodbye, you didn't say anything, you went to work. And then you're asking your employees how was their day, mm-hmm. all this kind of stuff. But you went around and you hugged everybody, but you seem like you could care less whether or not I was okay or not. Mm-hmm. That's a dangerous place to be, because you've gotten into a place of insensitivity, and you're not even, what's the word? The word I'm looking for. You're not even anticipating your spouse's needs at that point. Mm-hmm. You've just gotten to a point where you literally shut down, and you are allowing. And so the question then we ask is, how do we, what if there is a lack of intimacy? Right. And how do we then regain that and restructure that? Because Michelle J. Miller, and I'm laughing at some of the comments, Michelle and Marcus, they are Marcus and Michelle. Michelle, I got to put his name first. Don't start nothing with me. I got to put Marcus's name first. And it's funny because we kind of knew Michelle a little bit earlier, and we were really close to her, so I'm always used to saying Michelle. Mm-hmm. But I got to say Marcus first, because he is the man of his house. He is Mr. Boston. Okay, so anyway, I was laughing because there are times when you lose intimacy, you lose the connection, you lose the relationship. How do you get it back? Now I'm laughing at them because they really love each other. I mean, they're newlyweds. They just got into this thing, and so in the honeymoon phase, everything is perfect. We talk about that sometimes. Everything is perfect. I mean, when I tell you your breath don't stink, nothing smells bad, everything smells good, everything is wonderful, you can't do no wrong. But then as you get down that, the other thing is that sometimes the younger you are, you sometimes have those challenges too, where you fuss about a lot of stuff. When you're a little bit older, you don't really get into a lot of that stuff. You like, you're a little bit more mature, you're a little bit more seasoned, you've seen it, you've seen some other stuff, you're like, man, listen, But one of the things I say, the way that you increase your emotional, your spiritual, your physical, your sexual intimacy, because intimacy starts a long time before the bedroom. Mm-hmm. Intimacy starts in the long talks, the long walks, the time spent together. Mm-hmm. You have to learn your spouse's love language and speak that love language so that their love tank is filled up. And then as a result, more than likely, you'll never have to worry about them reciprocating any kind of love or anything, because guess what? Right. They're gonna speak your love language. And if you learn how to speak each other's love language, I saw this post today, and on one of my somebody was on my Instagram, and they made the statement. They said, you always hear the story, happy wife, happy life, and they said no, happy spouse, happy house. Mm-hmm. And I really like when they said that. And this was an unmarried woman that was saying this, and she was talking about sometimes how men are saying that they're really not happy. And they're not excited about being in the relationship they're in, because sometimes you can do everything you can to do for your spouse, and sometimes it's just not enough. What happens when you've done everything you can for your spouse and it's still not enough, and they're still not? Or what happens, like, again, even after a few years, it's like, the car, the house, you buy new things, you're excited. After a period of time, you can lose the enthusiasm. Right. You can lose the excitement that you once had in the honeymoon phase. So what you got to figure out how to do is keep that up, and see when it's like a gas tank. You don't wait till well, most folks do. Most people do wait till their gas tank is on empty before they put some gas in there. And then some of us are listen, we I won't say lazy, but some of us can be so lazy that we literally don't fill up the tank. You just kind of put a quarter tank in there, half a tank, and then you find, that's me. A lot of times I would do that. I would just put a half a tank in there, a quarter tank. I just put it up because I'm too lazy to stand outside and put more gas in the tank. But we can't do that with our relationships. Are you listening? You can't do that with your relationship. With your relationship, you've got to continue to keep your spouse's love tank filled up, so that they are full, and so that they will continue to reciprocate what you're pouring in. Right. Let me give you another analogy. This happened last week. It might have been last week. I think it was Thursday or Friday. We were at the HOA, the housing association where we live at. They put a ticket on our sent us a thing in the mail, and they sent us this thing in the mail, and it says that my driveway and that the area around my pool was that the concrete was dirty. And so I'm like, who tells you that your concrete is dirty? How can your driveway be dirty? I mean, what kind of sense does that make? It's a driveway. And so when we got the pressure cleaner, and there's this thing that's like a buffer, and it actually cleans the concrete. And so I did the first run on it, and I sprayed it off, and it was like a shade lighter. Then I did it again, sprayed it, and then I sprayed it off, and I found out that my driveway was actually dirty. It was really dirty. And so when I looked at it now, my driveway, my sidewalk, it's a whole lot cleaner than it was prior to me having to clean it off. Right. The moral to the story is that sometime over a period of time, you don't realize that your relationship has lost its strength. The intimacy has lost its strength. You don't realize that you started to take each other for granted. You don't realize that you're not listening to each other. You don't realize that you're not valuing each other's voice. You don't realize that your spouse is silently suffering and silently dying, and you don't realize it. Only thing you're looking at is we're married, we're happily married, we've been together 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. Last thing I was going to say on that was there was this lady. We got on this airplane, and they were probably in their late 60s, early 70s, and we were sitting beside each other, and I said, well, ma'am, I can scoot over and let you sit right beside your husband. And she said, honey, we've been married so long, he can sit wherever he wants to sit. He can do, as long as we get off of this airplane in the same place, baby, I don't care where we sit. And I laughed at that so hard, I said, oh God. I said, never let us get to the place, Lord, where we just don't care where we sit. None of it, we don't even care what happens with us. Don't let me get so desensitized to my spouse that I don't realize that my spouse is hurting. Don't let me get so far away from God and my spouse that I never care about what's hurting her or what's going on in her heart, what's going on in her mind, what's going on, what her issue is, that I can get to the point that I can literally make her cry and it won't even bother me, because we're going to offend our spouses. We're going to hurt our spouses. And even for wives, you can't get so that you can't be concerned. I'm not saying that brothers ought to always be, have an issue or whatever, because men, we're usually not like that. But I'm saying if your husband is always complaining about something, you need to find out what the root cause of that issue is. Right. If your spouse is always complaining, if they're always murmuring and complaining and upset, is it they're not close to the Lord? Is it that the intimacy is not there? Is it that they don't feel like they're being heard? Is it that they don't feel like do they feel rejected? You got to look at all those things and deal with that stuff accordingly, so that you can maintain your healthy and your happy relationship and marriage.
Yes. And I think, just like with anything else, even when you're on, you're working for an organization or a corporation, there is always some type of training on the, that you have to continue to go through and continue to, because any organization that does not change or does not invest in it won't survive. If you're not willing to, to invest in it, for it to grow, then it won't survive. And so that's just the way it is in a marriage. If you're not willing to invest in it, if you're not willing to really do something more than perhaps what you've done in the past, it's not going to grow. And so we have to begin to know that. We have to learn that. We have to really be passionate about that, because again, there is a real enemy. And if you can ever realize and know that your spouse is not your enemy, but there is a real enemy that is coming against the both of you, because the enemy knows, the devil knows, if he can get you divided, then you won't be able to fulfill your purpose with each other. And then in fulfilling your purpose with each other, you have a greater purpose to impact the world. And so again, we're fighting for marriages. We're fighting and knowing that, the enemy is after marriages. He really is. And so we want to be a testimony. We want you all to be a testimony, to say that, God is using your marriage, and your marriage is strong, and your marriage is growing. And, we've all gone through things. We've all, in any relationship, I don't care who you are, in any relationship, you're going to have some highs and lows. You're going to have some good times. You're going to have some not so good times. And so even in going back to the marriage vows, that you're saying, I promise to love this person, to be with this person in good times and in bad times, because you're going to have both, in sickness and in health, to death do us part. And so those things are important, because, trouble will come. During the time of marriage, trouble will come, trying times will come. There will be days when you're like, Lord, I just want to get as far away from this person as possible. But at the same time, there's purpose. And so we've got to be able to fight for that purpose.
Another thing that I saw somebody say is that a babysitter, and one person said a babysitter is cheaper than a divorce attorney. Another person said a therapist is cheaper than a divorce attorney. And so I think that's very true, that sometimes we don't realize that you can put the work in initially, and that getting a babysitter so you can spend time together is going to be cheaper than a divorce attorney. Because I was, I got a couple of people that I know that are going through divorce. And let me tell you something. Some of them have been in this divorce proceedings for a year, 6 months, a year, a year and a half, 2 years. They're fighting. Their kids are in the midst of it. Because you can't, even the divorce attorney, but even the children, the stuff that if you got kids and what they get dragged through, the emotional stuff, the mental stuff, the spiritual stuff. Come on. And so you go through all of that. But if you just spent the time that it takes to be able to get that whole relationship things together, I think it'll make a difference. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep. had to release some people from the responsibility of being on the scope. Amen. Well, listen, what are some questions that you guys have? What are some thoughts that you want answered? Somebody said, yep, my divorce was 18 plus months.
Wow.
And so, and I can't even, I don't even know if you can talk about how much money you spent. I'm not just talking about with your attorney. I'm talking about with your gas and going back and forth, in splitting up things, in restarting over, in emotions, in time that you lost, in just the emotional detachment. I have a person that I know that they're going through a whole divorce process, and now they've actually moved out. They live alone, and so now you're living alone. But living alone, you realize it's not the same. It doesn't feel the same. You go through these emotional processes. You go through all of these processes that it takes to actually to be alone, and it doesn't feel good. It's tough. It can really be tough. It can be anybody that's ever been through divorce knows what I'm talking about. You got to get reacclimated. So I think taking the time to make sure that you're not getting distant in your relationship, to take the time that it takes to hear your spouse, the time that it takes to make sure you're not taking your spouse for granted, making sure you're taking the time, just all of those processes. Somebody was saying it's horrible.
Right.
I'm seeing
divorce
people saying
hurts. It does.
It does.
I've been divorced, and even though I wanted the divorce, there's still nothing like divorce. It is a death. It feels like a death. It feels like something, a part of you has died, and that in essence that's what has happened. And divorce, nobody wins in divorce. Nobody wins because it's a tearing, it's a ripping apart. People are affected, people that love you and care about you, and families and friends, children, if children are involved. You just never know what that does to a child. Having to, you've grown up with your parents, and then all of a sudden, they're divorced, and you're like, my God, what happened? Was it me? You just never know what effect that has on a child, growing up. And then what happens, it really almost, it can set a tone for their life, because, I had some statistics here, even about, the percentage of children, of people getting divorced that come from divorced families, and so you have to begin to look at that. And sometimes, again, it goes back to selfishness. Wow. People just wanting to be selfish, I don't care, I'm going to do this, and, so on and so forth, or I'm going to go outside, my home, and I'm going to do this, that, and the other, or, I'm not going to listen to you, or I choose to be abusive to you. That's a choice. That's a choice. And that choice, most times those choices are out of pure selfishness.
Somebody asked a question, can a selfish person be changed, or should we run away or put energy in trying to solve the problem? I think that anybody can change. Selfishness is a result of the flesh. This is my opinion. And what I found is that there are times when I've been selfish. I'm sure we've all been selfish. We want it our way. Let me tell you something. During this broadcast, I think even selfishness, somebody else, how long did it take to get your communication flowing after marriage? I'm going to answer that question second. So let me tell y'all something that happened. It's an animalistic, it's a part of our nature to be selfish. Earlier during the broadcast, what y'all couldn't hear was downstairs, Agape has this thing where he literally, if there's no food or water in his bowl, he will drag his bowl across the house and like whine. And so he's down there, I'm telling you, I'm trying to focus on the broadcast, and he's down here like, he's just whining. Dragging his bowl, barking at the bowl, like, will you please come bring me something to eat? And so when I had the Facebook went off, and so for those of you watching on Periscope, you didn't really experience that the broadcast went off, and then it came back. But so what happens is, here he is, and he is literally down there just having a whole fit. Well, selfishness, he was selfish. Yeah. He wasn't concerned about what we had going on. He wasn't concerned about what we needed. He wasn't concerned about what we were doing. The only thing he was concerned about is whether or not he was comfortable or not. And the reality is that we have a society that perpetuates selfishness.
Right.
Our society perpetuates it. This is why everybody wants fast food. When we come home, nobody wants to wait on anybody to cook. Everything we want it to be fast. We want it to be thick, quick. But literally, this fast stuff is killing us. It's killing our relationships.
Yes.
It's killing our bodies. It's killing our health. It's killing everything when we do not take the time to build authentic relationships. Look what happens at most people. Again, we're concerned about how things benefit us.
Right.
Let me tell you, even social media is driven like that.
Somebody say, when I'm hungry, I manifest.
Somebody said, when I'm hungry, I manifest. That is funny. So, but okay, look at social media. Look at the difference between somebody posts something, when somebody posts something, and what they post. It can be truth, but it may be a truth nobody wants to hear. You don't get any likes. Then you see somebody post something that tickles people's ears, and it's what everybody wants to hear. Then guess what? Everybody likes it.
Yes.
And so you got to look at it. I don't care how many people followers you have. You can post something that nobody likes, and all of a sudden nobody will like it.
Yes.
And so you got to look at that and realize that our society in general is selfish and it's perpetuated. So what you got to do is you got to figure out how to get your spouse and how to work with each other to not necessarily how to crucify your flesh. I think it's very important. Yeah, put it back so I can see the questions. So you gotta crucify your flesh, so that, and then especially if y'all saved. If you ain't saved, you gotta crucify your flesh even more, so that your flesh will be crucified, so it doesn't respond to your unsaved spouse. Jesus. What if y'all you married and you're unequally yoked? What if you are I don't want to say more saved, but what if you have a greater level of temperance and meekness than your spouse does, and their meekness is still being worked on? Then you got to crucify yourself. Listen, I think the answer to all of this is crucifixion.
Right.
I think that if you're dead, and if your flesh is dead, your emotions are dead, all of that stuff is dead, you don't have to worry about what your spouse is doing. Come on, crucify yourself. Because if you crucify it, your spouse becomes a mute point. Listen, they can fuss all they want to, baby, I still love you. Yeah. Praise the Lord. Oh, you're so wonderful. They cussing, fussing, doing whatever, and you're sitting there like, praise the Lord. Yes, it's wonderful. It's amazing. Now some of y'all are like, man, you got to be kidding me. You crazy.
Give you fuel.
Right. But I'm not going to put fuel in your fire.
I'm not going to put fuel in your fire. Yeah.
And somebody says, so should we put energy and try to change our selfish spouse or run? You cannot. That's what I'm trying to answer. You can't change your spouse. No. What you can do is you can walk with them through a process of crucifixion. You can walk with them through a process of death. Right. You can walk with them through a process of crucifying their flesh, of getting closer to God. This is why I think it's so important for us to go to a church that really talks about deliverance, that talks about really dealing with our healing, our emotions. My wife is getting ready to do a Bible study on Wednesday nights entitled Healing. What's that? Healing of the soul. Healing of the soul. And so, because we're finding that people, the problem is not even that just. Let me say this: what happens when your spouse was deprived, either in their childhood or they were spoiled in their childhood, and they were not, they were previously married and they were deprived. They went through all these processes, and then they meet you. You spoil them, you love on them, you bless them. Well, then what happens is it may not even be that they're fully selfish. It may be that they were just starved. And so you need some teaching. They need some training. Right. Everybody's not selfish because they want to be selfish. Right. Sometimes they were selfish because of the environment. Yes. Sometimes they went through processes that caused them to be a little bit more selfish. Yes. And so you got all of those factors that you have to look at and that you have to analyze.
That's good. That's really
about
good.
Your spouse.
Right, because there may be other insinuating factors that causes them to be selfish without them even knowing it. They feel like that's their normal. Maybe they, in a family, in a large family, whatever, and they didn't have much, or, so on and so forth. It's just so many different things that can really cause a person to be selfish. And so we don't want to just give up on and say, I'm running, I'm leaving. No, I really believe, too, there are times, marriage is so amazing. It is so amazing.
And let me throw this. Selfishness is not a reason for divorce biblically.
Right.
So you can't divorce your spouse because they're selfish. I think this is the part that comes in good premarital counseling, for you to be able, for the counselor to be able to say, now, you know what, you're really selfish. Now, most times, the counselor's not able to say that. But I've been in some situations where I would tell my wife, I said, listen, if they get married now, she is very selfish. And he is too. They're going to be in a mess. God forbid they bring a baby into this world. It's going to really be a mess, because I don't know what the baby going to get. If he's selfish and she's selfish, it's going to be a real mess. And so you got to look at that and think about it, even as it, but selfishness is not a grounds for divorce, it's just not. Now if a person is cheating on you, if a person is beating you, being physically abusive, then those of course are grounds for divorce. So I think you got to look at it. But again, I'd rather find out on the front end that I have a spouse that's selfish, and then and see if I can deal with that, than wait down the line and not have even done. Because see, when you first meet, you're in love. Right. You love each other, man. Listen, you're head over heels, your honeymoon phase. You don't even care if they're selfish. You just think he's fine, she's so fine, they're both so fine. And so you don't even get into whether or not they're selfish until down the line. You're like, you don't even like to share. You don't like to share at all. Like, my God, I mean, like, you don't even want to share the toilet paper, man. You want your own roll of toilet paper. We gotta have 2 cars. We can't even share a car. You don't share well. Because your parents didn't require you to share. You were only child. It was only about you. You're spoiled. And so now you got this whole root of being spoiled. It's a problem. Yeah.
And at the same time, you were saying, what should you do? One of the things I think is so very important, I'll give you an example, is to find out, God, what is my assignment in this situation? Not your assignment to fix the person or to change the person. No, God, what is my assignment?
What are you doing in me?
And what are you doing in me? What because marriage will show you who you are and who you're not. Marriage will show you if you're really patient or not. Marriage will show you if you love unconditionally or not. So God, what are you trying to do in me, God? Are you trying to draw me closer to you? Are you trying to show me something that I can only get from you? And so we have to begin to look at that, because the first thing that we want to do is change the other person to fit us.
And something you just said I think is very valuable. Sometimes we expected our spouse to do what only God can do.
Only God.
Because sometimes there are voids in your life. There are places where your soul had, there were holes, there were challenges. There were things that your mother didn't do when you were growing up. There were things that your father didn't do. So you have all these voids and all these broken places, and then you want to get married expecting your spouse to do it. Then you call your spouse selfish because your spouse doesn't do what you need them to do. But your spouse can't go back and correct 25, 30, 40 years of brokenness. Your spouse can't go back and correct stuff that you never got from your mom or your dad, and you shouldn't even expect them to. Yes. It's like I talk about people with children's church. This is on a whole nother thought, but I tell people in children's church, I said it's not fair for you to expect the children's church director for them to raise your child in 2 hours when you've had 168 hours during the week, and so you want them to take those 2 hours on Sunday and 2 hours on Wednesday, and God forbid you go to a drive-through church where the service is only 45 minutes to an hour. If the service is only 45 minutes to an hour, you drop the kids off, you come back, and then you expect that person to raise your kids, or your school system to raise your kid. It's not their job. And so there's some things that's your responsibility. There's some things that's the parents' responsibility. And so you got to look at that. And so you can't put that responsibility on your spouse. Right. Another thing is sometimes women want to believe they can change a man. You can't change a man. You can't, and then men, you can't raise a wife if her parents didn't do it. You can't raise her. You can't raise him. You can't change that spouse. What you got to do is pray that they would mature. Right. But you can't go back and correct 30 years of craziness. Right. And then I find, let me go here. I pastor a church. You pastor a church, right? Yes. I had to learn. It took me. We're in our 9th year. It took me 9 years to learn that sometimes people come to the church and they have issues. And so they come expecting you to fix their issues, and when you don't fix their issues, they take them same issues they had and they leave saying that the church didn't minister to them, it didn't bless them, it didn't do this or that. And people go to divorce court saying that their spouse did X, Y, or Z, when the reality was you were broken before you got married.
Right.
And so you can't expect that person to fix you, change you. You can't change anybody.
Right.
You can't get married to, you know what? You buy a car and then you're like, you know what? I'm gonna change the seats out. I'm gonna put the seats in I want to put in. I'm gonna put a new engine in it. I'm gonna change the paint color. You know, I'm gonna do all this stuff, and I'm gonna make it do what I want it to do. But that's a car. That's a house. But you can't do that with a spouse.
Right.
You can't retrofit them and make them, change, now let me say this. I was laughing. They know who I'm talking about. We were talking about, false expectations. Thank you, Abigail. She said marriage is not an escape to find instant wholeness. I love that.
Wow.
Abigail is a counselor.
Good. That's
good. And that's good. You can't just, it just doesn't work like that. And so I was laughing when my wife when we met. There are some things you can upgrade in your spouse. When we first met, I had a pair of Stacey Adams. I think I had a broke down pair of tennis shoes, and then I had a couple of suits. Now these suits were church suits, and so since we've been married, I've actually, y'all see me watching the scope. I have an array of clothing now. But that's because my wife is a fashionista. Listen, let me tell you something. I won't even talk about closets, my God. And she don't want me to talk about closets. But I'm just saying, she upgraded me in that area. But there's nothing wrong with that. I was laughing. Somebody I know, they know who I'm talking about. They said that their spouse had some clothes that they had to get rid of when they got married. Because they were like, you're not going nowhere with me wearing that, brother. And so, but that's how it is sometimes. There are certain things that you can change. There are certain things you can't upgrade. But then there's something, but then the other side of it is that you gotta let your spouse be your spouse and let them grow and let them become mature, and you need to find out a lot of that stuff beforehand so you don't go into a relationship and make the person resent you because you're trying to change them into being who they were never destined to be.
And sometimes that happens, that you lose yourself in a marriage because you've tried to conform to your spouse. You've tried to conform, and so you've lost yourself.
That's good.
You've lost yourself, and so you can't give them something that you've lost.
Right.
It's impossible. And so you realize you wake up one day, and usually it's after the divorce that you wake up and say, who am I? Because I've lost myself. Yep.
So I think that's very important. I think it's very important for all of us to look at, again, is your spouse really selfish, or were they always like this? Did they get like this during the relationship? Did the relationship make it look like this? This is why I think premarital counseling is so important. I'm telling you, I think premarital counseling is so important, because if you don't really get somebody's external viewpoint and perspective on who your spouse is, man, you'll mess around and marry somebody.
Because we most times look blindly.
Oh, we look, man, listen, I'm in love.
Yes.
Everybody wants me to tell them what I think about something until they meet their spouse. When they meet their spouse, you know what? Don't judge me. I found who I wanted. The Lord told me this. That's what people say. The Lord told me this is my. I'm not. And listen, I don't need no. I don't need no input. I don't need it because the Lord told me this. Then later on down the line, and I'm the kind of pastor. I'm like this. Okay, you meet him, you fall in love with him, you want to be in a relationship. You didn't want to come talk to me about it. You didn't want to listen to what I had to say. Well, listen to what the Lord said. So when things are going crazy down the line, don't come to me talking about, Pastor, but this is going on and that's going on. No, because you said the Lord said. So I never argue with anybody about what they say the Lord said. Because if the Lord told you that was your spouse, if the Lord said that was who it was, no problem. So listen to the Lord now. What is the Lord saying? Because you heard from the Lord. And now you realize, maybe I didn't hear from the Lord. Maybe that wasn't the Lord talking. Maybe that, because when we talk about in the prophetic, we say there's the voice of the Lord, there is the enemy's voice, there's the demonic voices, and there's the voice of the flesh.
Yes.
Sometimes our flesh is talking. Sometimes our flesh is talking so loud we can't even hear the warning signs from God to say, no, you should let that one mature a little bit longer. Hold on, wait just a little bit longer. You saw the warning signs, and other people saw the warning sign of the verbal abuse, of the physical abuse, of the emotional abuse, of the infidelity. All of that stuff was seen, but sometimes we ignore it.
Yes.
Because we heard from the Lord, and we are so in love,
Yes.
and He is so handsome, and she is so fine. Oh my God! And before you know it, you're like, oh my God.
Yes.
So, at any rate, questions.
Any questions before we
Get out of here.
And I said, don't put the Lord in your mess. But you know, there are times when God wants to do something. Even as I said, I would give the example. We know of a couple. We talked about it even earlier on our broadcast during midday. That the spouse, the husband, he became very selfish. He became very selfish. He started drinking. He started doing all kind of crazy things. Lost jobs. Really just did a whole lot of stuff. And he was very selfish. Wife, very good woman, working a professional, really trying to make things happen, make things work, and, really trying to hang in there, hold things together. And so walking through that whole process and trying to go to counseling, and, people were telling her, don't, you just need to give up on him. He's not going to change. He's not going to change. He's not going to change. And so she just, would just pray. And she said, I know how I feel. I feel my flesh says, let it go, be gone. But there's something in my spirit that is saying, God is not through yet. And so, she was saying, I want you guys to pray, because I want to make sure I'm in the perfect will of God. It's easy to give up. It's easy to say, oh, I'm tired of this. This is, you've hurt me for the last time. I'm not going to deal with this with you anymore. I'm done. Easy to do that. But it takes a woman, or it takes a man that really loves God to say, I believe in what God said about you, even though you cutting up sideways, even though you're selfish, even though you're hurting me, you're hurting our family. But what does God say? And so when we can get to that point, when God, began to deal with this wife, He gave her a plan to anoint him, to pray over him. And she said there were times she would be so mad, instead of just putting the oil on her, she would just slap his head. And so, but they have a testimony now. They have an amazing testimony. And those were very hard times. They were very challenging times. They were, I tell you, it was tough. It was very tough. They almost lost everything. But the testimony that they now have is now blessing hundreds and thousands of people.
And let me say something about that. I remember that conversation, and and they tell the story, and I remember her asking the question, like, y'all pray for me. What do you think? And I'm like, don't give up, because I know what it's like to be a man who doesn't have everything together. So I'm like, don't give up, because I know who he really is on the inside. And so that's another thing I really believe. You got to have some trusted voices around you.
Yes.
That's the thing about the wedding. At the wedding, you have all these people who sit in the stands. And one of the things we always talk about at the wedding is your purpose for being there in the stands is not just to witness a cute wedding. Your purpose for being there is to commit to pray for them and commit to believe in what the vows. You're taking a part in the vows that they're making. It's not just them standing there. It's you being committed to pray for them and stand with them and believe God for the success of the marriage that they've started. And because there are going to be some challenging times, that's like baby dedications. We're not just dedicating them then, we're making a commitment to stand with them, to stand beside them, to give them an example, to guard them, to protect them, to encourage them when they want to quit, they want to give up, they want to throw in the towel. No, we're believing God for them. I'm not going to stand by and let you get divorced. I'm not going to stand by and let somebody come in and destroy what you got. No, I'm going to be committed to seeing you through what it is that you start. And so you got to have people around you that are committed to being with you and standing with you, Got to be committed to having people that are standing with you.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Then somebody asked the question, how long did it take us to be able to get through to communicate? I think we've always had decent communication. Now, let me be honest. There have been times where I may have taken her voice for granted, or she may have necessarily, I don't think she's ever taken my voice for granted, but I think there were times when I didn't hear her because as the man, I thought that I had I'm the man, I got the answers. And so I'm like, and then so there were times when she shut down because I wasn't necessarily hearing what she had to say. But I think we've always had that thing of communication. We had a year, like I said, we've only been apart for what? Probably like 72 hours is the longest period of time we've ever spent apart.
Right.
And that was about 2 years ago when I had to go to Peru, and I went by myself. And even though we were apart, every time I got through preaching, I would come and call. I'd get back to the Wi-Fi, I'd call. And so that was just how we operated. And now we usually are always together. We usually get, now sometimes, I go to the office or she has a meeting or we go different places and we have to spend a few minutes apart. But most of the time we're together. Right. That's just us. Now that's not everybody. For some people that would drive them bananas. It's not for everybody, but it was for us.
Yeah, and with myself, I had to purposely, and I'm still growing in it. I'm still growing it, but I had to purposely begin to communicate and learn how to communicate effectively with my husband, learn how to effectively communicate as a pastor, as a leader in our community, in the different things, in the different places that God has really graced and given us such favor to go into. And so, again, we have to, one thing about us as people, we will have to change. Whether we want to or not, we're going to have to change. We serve a God that does not change, but he'll never leave us the same. We have to change. We have to grow. We have to learn how to do things differently than what we've done it in the past. And so if we want something greater, we've got to do something greater. We've got to begin to change. Our mindset has to change. And going into marriage, your mindset has to change to say, it's 50-50. It's not 50-50. It is giving all of yourself. It is giving more than what you receive. And so even with that being, not being selfish, even the Word of God talks about, dealing with selfishness, that we are to give, do nothing out of selfish ambition or gain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves. That's Philippians 2:3. And so that's not just 50-50. No, it is 100%. I'm giving, everything that I have to this marriage to because the marriage becomes the ministry. How can you minister when you look at it in a different perspective? How can I minister to my husband? How can I minister to my wife? And not just change them, but how can I minister to them? I remember looking at a video, Dr. Miles Monroe, and it talks about, you say you want your wife to lose weight, but have you invested in her? You know what I mean? Good. Have you invested in her? Have you, taken her and, shown her different things, or, how to do this, or I'll help you? Have you made that investment in your spouse, in what you want him to do or want her to do, or how you want how you want them to look? Have you taken the time to invest in them?
Yeah. When I thought about that, and what he said made so much sense, because sometimes we're talking at our spouse and not to our spouse, or we're barking orders on stuff or talking about stuff we want to change, but we're not willing to invest the time, the energy, the effort it takes to really help our spouse become, to make the change. Right. So you're saying, okay, I don't like those pants, or I don't like that, or I don't like this. But then, I like that Terrence Turner said, who wants 50% of a person? Nobody does. I really like that. So you're saying that, but then we're not taking the time to really be able to help our spouse walk through the process of change. How much do you really love them? And is the change that, here's another question, is the change that you're trying to see in your spouse more about your comfort and your desire, or is it something that's going to make your spouse better? And you got to look at that. Is it something that's going to make them better, or is it really just all about you? And so we have to check even our motive for wanting to see our spouse change. We got to check our motive for wanting to implement different ideas and different, other things about our spouse. I think that's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell you, this has been amazing, and we pray that you've really gotten something out of this, that you're beginning to see things differently, even in your marriage and your relationships, those that are contemplating marriage, going into it knowing that marriage is a beautiful thing. That's why God created it. It represents Christ's relationship with the church, and just really seeking the purpose of marriage. Why did God bring you together? It's more than just you look good, he looks good. No, it's way more than that. And so when you understand the purpose of your marriage, then you have to be willing to fight for it. You have to be willing to give more, because with anything you're going to have to give more than you thought you were going to have to give. So yeah.
So you guys, for those of you who want to,
that's right, no discounts in relationships.
there is a flyer. Right, you can look good and still be in trouble. Yep, I agree, and I believe marriage is beautiful too. I really do. I really believe that marriage is beautiful, and I believe that it's honorable, and I believe it's amazing. I believe all those things. I want to look at this flyer for those of you who want us to send you our text, be on our text list for the marriage quotes and things like that. You can text 813-308-0638. And again, that's 813-308-0638. The other thing that I was going to share with you was that, and what we're going to do is we're going to put together some marriage quotes just to keep you encouraged, to keep you, going in the right direction. And the other thing is, of course, you can go to our website. If you're in Little Rock, Arkansas, we're coming to Little Rock October 18th, 19th, and 20th. Us, Apostle John Eckhart, Apostle Prophet Kyle Miller, and of course Apostle JoJo Dawson. We're coming to do one of our suddenly meetings in Arkansas. We're coming to Little Rock the 18th, 19th, and 20th, and all of those have been tremendously amazing, and so we'd love to meet you there if you're going to be there. Also, our new book, Sudden Breakthrough, is out. There's a special chapter by Apostle John Eckhart, and so really excited about that. If you've not gotten it, then we want you to go get it. It's available on Amazon. You can also go to Barnes & Nobles and get it, and you can also go to our website if you want a signed copy. Likewise, you can also, for those of you who already have it, we would love for you to take a photo with it, talk about how it's blessed your life, and then take a photo with it, talk about how it's blessed your life, and tag us in that, and post it on your Facebook timeline, on your social media timeline. That would mean so much to us. We really appreciate those who would do that, because it gets the word out to other people that the book is out there and that it would be blessed. Let me ask you one last question before we go. Let me ask you this question. Trina Pope, let me ask you, let me see, Trina Pope, who else is on here? Let me ask you this question. Terrence, I'm going to get your feedback. Here's a question that I got for you. If we put all of our notes into, in the notes that we've talked about, Pillow Talk Season 1, Pillow Talk Season 2, if we put those into notes and put it into a book form, do people think, do you think that would be something that you would want? Do you think it would be something that would be beneficial? We've thought about that a couple times, but we have not necessarily done it. And so I'm interested to know whether or not that would be something that you guys think would be beneficial, or something that you would like to be able to receive if we put our notes from the whole marriage series that we've been doing on the Pillow Talks. If we put that into a book form, would that be beneficial, and would that be something that you would be interested in receiving? That's the question. Did they give any answers?
Let me see.
You went somewhere else. Okay, I think it would be beneficial. Thank you.
Wonderful.
That would be wonderful. Okay, good. And what we'll probably do, yes, Shanika, I don't care what I do. Shanika's she's gonna love it. She'll be like, yes, Dad. Okay. And then the other thing we're gonna do is we're gonna have some visitors that are gonna be with us. And so I'm really looking at some of the. We've got like Shanika and Reggie from our Charlotte church. They're gonna be with us. The stalwarts from our Tallahassee church. They're gonna be with us. Then I'm gonna see if I can get a couple other couples like Marcus and Michelle. I'm gonna see if they'll come on with us one episode and just kind of share some of their journey. We're also gonna have some of our other friends like Gerald and Yvette. I'm gonna see if they'll come on a couple times and really share some of their thought processes. Because I think that there's a lot of benefit that you get from other couples as we interact and we interview them and their relationships as well. So I think those are going to be some tremendous pillow talks as we bring and integrate other people into it. And then James and Angela Scruggs, we talked to them the other night. They have a phenomenal marriage ministry as well. And they're another group of spiritual sons and daughters. So we're going to bring them in. And so there's a couple of different people that we want to bring in to talk about this subject of marriage and relationships and just see how it benefits you guys as we do that. So at any rate, we love you. And make sure that I answer any final questions or anything that you guys have coming up before we close out. Any other questions? Any other thoughts that you have? Okay. Let me make sure somebody said that would be wonderful. I think it'd be beneficial. Okay, good. All right. Yep, the Bostons. Oh yeah, we're bringing them all. We sure are. Yep, we really love them, and they have a tremendous marriage, and they just got married. But I really believe God's going to use them, and even the prophetic words Apostle John spoke over them when they did their first service at Crusaders after being married. He spoke some really strong prophetic words, and even correlated with some of the other prophetic words that have been spoken over their life. So I really want to bring them on and let them spend some time with us. And so I think it's going to be amazing.
Yes.
Yep. Any other questions? Any other thoughts? Yeah. And you guys can inbox us your questions. We'd love to get your questions inboxed for next week. Share the flyer for next week. Share the video. Let people know that we're coming on. Let people know that we're going to be here. Go ahead.
What would be, is 9 o'clock good for you guys or 10 o'clock? I know sometimes with families and trying to get kids to bed and so on and so forth, would 9 o'clock work better or 10 o'clock? So look at that.
I don't know if everybody heard the question. My wife is asking what time would be better. Would you rather do these at 9? So Nelly Chanel says 9. 9. Okay, I got 9. 9. I got a lot of 9s. Somebody says 10. Okay, repurpose 9 for me. Okay. 9. Trina Pope, 9. Okay. We got 1 10. Everything else is a 9. 9's over there. 9's over here.
Okay, 9.
9 is good.
9 is good.
Girl, you better listen to your husband. 9 is the time.
Still early in California, yep. 9 o'clock, okay.
Oh, yeah, 9, yeah, because you were saying Marcus is struggling to say, repurpose for greater said I lost. The 9s have it, amen.
Hey, repurpose for greater, I was for 10, so.
Yeah, she was trying to get the 10 out of him, but it looked like the 10 wasn't working.
It wasn't working,
It wasn't working. Yep. So we love you guys. Thank God for you.
Yes.
And we look forward to talking with you more. And please send us your inbox, your questions. We'd love to hear what your questions are and hear what's on your heart, because this is just about all of us as a community being healthy and being strong as far as relationships and marriages are concerned, and really, really being on one accord. It's fun. When we first did it the first time, we caught some flack because we were laying in the bed, talking. But I think that,
this isn't even our bedroom, but, it's important that we really bring real life, because we deal with real life and, dealing with the different challenges that we face, as people, as married couples.
Now, Castillo, you asked inbox where you can either inbox us on Facebook. If you don't have Facebook, then you can, if you don't have Facebook, then you can inbox us or on our website. You go to our website and leave a comment, www.LaJunandValora.com, or you can, of course, always text us at 1-844-WE-ARE-COLE, W-E, the letter R, and C-O-L-E. You can always text us on that number, or you can send us an email at info at LaJunandValora.com. Again, that's info at LaJunandValora.com. And you can email us there.
Thank you, Pam Gladden66. Thank you. Yes, thank you for being with us tonight. We love you guys.
Yep. So there it is. Yep. That's how you get us. Well, we're getting out of here. We love you. We'll talk to you next week. Meet us tomorrow for our midday Periscope at 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock?
And then we might. Somebody said, "How should I?" Let me answer this question. How should I pray for my future wife as a man?
Wow.
Wow. You know, I think that you really pray. You pray for her and you pray for you.
Mm-hmm.
Pray for yourself to be more sensitive to her needs, to her desires. To her fulfilling her destiny, her purpose, and then pray for her to have a desire to understand you as a man,
right?
To understand how to be able to, because you can answer some of that too.
Yes.
How would you want your future husband to pray for you?
You know, to of course, for me to be the woman that God has called me to be in your assignment in my life, and then their assignment in your life, because I realize and know that I am a helpmeet. I help him to meet his assignment. God has called me to be alongside him, to walk with him, to pray for him, and to cover him. You know, one of the things my husband said when we first met, and even before we had talked, as he was speaking one day in church, he said, God, if you were to give me a wife, she had to really know how to pray. Really know what my assignment is in the earth. And so those things are so very important, because a wife can make or break you, especially when you've called to ministry. We're going to talk about that, at another time, but very, very important, because a man can totally get out of the will of God if they don't have the right spouse.
Mm-hmm.
If she doesn't understand your purpose and calling. And it's just like, oh no, I don't want to do that. That's not a part of my life. That's your life. That's not a part of my life. And so really having the wife that understands your call, understands what God has called you to do, and being able to assist you in that process.
And I think it goes the other way around too. Mm-hmm. I think as a husband, you want to know how to cover her.
Right.
You want to know how to pray for her. Mm-hmm. Even how to be sensitive to her past failures, her past frailties, mm-hmm. her past fears. And I think likewise as a wife, you need to pray for your husband's fears, because even as men, there are things that we have fears.
Right.
We have areas where we're insecure. We have areas where we have failed. We have areas where we struggle, where we war. And so you have to be able to look at all those different areas and pray for your spouse, mm-hmm. and make sure, so I think that's important. I really think that's important. Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, we love you guys. We'll talk with you later.
God bless. Bye-bye.